Imagine waking up one day to discover that the greatest threat to a nation is not an enemy army across the ocean, not an unknown force hiding in the shadows, but a single man standing alone against an entire country. And that man is not driven by hatred, revenge, or conquest, but by something far more dangerous: belief in his own creation and the unshakable conviction that he alone can change the course of history. The world had always trusted its systems, its governments, its endless layers of defense that promised safety in numbers. Yet in this moment, those numbers meant nothing, because one mind had decided to challenge them all. This is not a story about destruction, but about the terrifying power of determination when it is fueled by intelligence and purpose beyond fear. A genius billionaire, a man who built his strength from metal and fire, now stands against jets roaring through the skies, missiles armed with unstoppable force, and armies trained for war since birth. Yet he does not tremble because he knows something the world has forgotten: that innovation does not need permission, and courage does not wait for approval. When the declaration of war was made by mistake, the world laughed, believing it to be nothing more than a technical glitch, a misunderstanding, a bureaucratic error that would be resolved before sunrise. But sunrise came, and the silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Advanced AI systems were activated. Satellites repositioned themselves in orbit, and battle strategies were drawn against a single human being. Yet the question no one dared to ask echoed in every command center: what if one man is enough? The machines built to protect millions were suddenly aimed at one individual who refused to stand down. And the deeper truth began to reveal itself as hours passed without retreat or surrender. He was not fighting to prove his strength against a nation. He was fighting to prove that strength does not belong to nations alone. Somewhere in the chaos of commands and countdowns, a realization began to take shape that this war was never about weapons or power, but about the courage to stand alone when the world expects you to kneel. And in the stillness before the first strike, when technology prepared to clash against technology in the ultimate test of progress and pride, a silent question gripped humanity. If everything you ever built turned against you, would you have the courage to stand your ground, knowing that failure would not only end your journey, but redefine what it means to challenge the impossible? The moment the first engines ignited in the distance and the sky began to tremble beneath the sound of approaching power, the illusion of safety that humanity had trusted for generations started to fade into something far more fragile than anyone had imagined. Because this was no longer a test of military strength, but a confrontation between collective dependence and individual resolve. Entire fleets moved with precision, guided by calculations designed to predict fear, hesitation, and surrender. Yet they were facing a man who had long ago abandoned the comfort of predictable outcomes and replaced it with an unwavering commitment to his own vision. Every radar locked onto him. Every satellite followed his movements. And every strategist believed that numbers would eventually overwhelm innovation. But belief is not measured in quantity, and courage cannot be mapped by coordinates. He did not step forward as a symbol of rebellion or defiance against authority, but as a reminder that progress is born from those who refuse to accept the limits imposed by the majority. Somewhere in the vast network of war rooms and command centers, doubt began to whisper through confident voices, because for every missile prepared for launch, there was an answer hidden in the very intelligence they underestimated. The clash that followed was not immediate, because true conflict does not begin with explosions, but with hesitation, with the moment when certainty begins to crumble under the weight of an unexpected possibility. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early. As time stretched into an unbearable silence, strategies that had once guaranteed victory now struggled against unpredictability, because no simulation had ever accounted for the determination of a single mind that refused to follow the script. The deeper the nation pushed forward with its unstoppable machines, the more it realized that technology alone does not define power. Because power is the ability to stand alone when everything around you demands retreat. In that defining stretch of seconds, the true battle revealed itself not in the sky, but within the hearts of those watching. Because they were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth that had always been buried beneath layers of obedience and routine. That sometimes the greatest revolutions are not led by armies, but by individuals who are willing to carry the weight of impossibility without asking for permission or forgiveness. And as the tension reached a breaking point that threatened to reshape the very meaning of victory and defeat, a deeper realization began to rise within the silence that followed every calculated move. That perhaps this war was never meant to destroy a nation, but to awaken one. To remind the world that strength is not found in numbers alone, but in the courage to stand when standing feels meaningless, and to fight when fighting seems hopeless. Because the moment you stop believing in your own ability to shape your destiny is the moment you surrender without a single battle being fought. As the final phase of confrontation approached and the distance between overwhelming force and solitary resistance collapsed into a single irreversible moment, something far more profound than fear began to spread through the minds of those who had once believed that unity in numbers guaranteed dominance. Because the world was witnessing a truth it had spent centuries trying to ignore. That progress has always been driven by those who dared to stand apart from the safety of collective agreement. The man inside the armor was no longer just a symbol of technological brilliance, but a reflection of the silent potential buried within every individual who had ever been told that they were too small to challenge something too great. Every movement he made against the endless machinery sent a message louder than any explosion. That strength is not born from the permission of systems, but from the courage to confront them when they become obstacles instead of protectors. Nations are built on trust in shared power. Yet history has repeatedly shown that transformation often begins with those who are willing to risk everything for an idea that others cannot yet understand. The sky above became a battlefield, not only for weapons, but for belief itself. Because every observer was forced to ask whether safety lies in obedience or in the willingness to question what everyone else accepts without thought. As the machines adapted and recalculated their responses in a desperate attempt to regain control of an outcome that was slipping beyond logic, the man they faced refused to act out of anger or desperation, because he understood that true resilience is not fueled by rage but by purpose. The outcome of this war would not simply determine who was stronger, but would redefine what strength truly meant in an age where intelligence had become the most powerful weapon humanity possessed. In the echo of every near collision and every narrowly avoided strike, a realization continued to grow that victory is not always measured by survival, but by the ability to remain true to your convictions when the cost of doing so appears unbearable. This was not the story of a man trying to defeat a nation, but of an individual challenging the assumption that greatness belongs only to the collective. And in doing so, he reminded the world that innovation begins where fear ends. And as the final seconds stretched into a silence that seemed to hold the weight of countless expectations, the greatest lesson of all emerged from the chaos: that the true battle each person faces is not against armies or machines, but against the voice within that insists surrender is safer than resistance. Because the moment you choose to believe that your vision matters even when the world doubts you, is the moment you become unstoppable, not because you cannot fail, but because you refuse to. Stop trying even when failure seems inevitable. And in that refusal lies the very essence of what it means to challenge the impossible and transform it into reality.